saw the agenda, and I had asked her to make sure you're on the email list, and we can make sure that happens. And Carrie can, she's our administrator, so we'll make sure that gets in the minutes that you volunteered, and I think that's very important.
I just think it's.
Oh, I do too. I do
I
too.
was not aware of the committee,
Okay.
and I've been on the board for a long time, and
Right.
I just think that we need to be involved, and we would be glad to be involved. And if I can't be here, we'll send someone in our.
And we appreciate that. And let me give you just a little evolution of the committee in that it had been basically just 3 council members and staff. And it was what, maybe 3 years ago? Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago, we set aside the first half hour to our business community. And I can't say that we've put it out to everybody from the chamber, please come, but we put it out to the leadership of those organizations, and at that time, the port was invited. Probably not you, probably staff. Okay.
I didn't know that you guys had this group, and I know, in our commission meetings, we talk about the different cities and how our facilities work within those cities, but we didn't know, you probably didn't know either, that you guys are here, and I'm glad to see that you guys have this organization.
Right.
I mean, I think it's great to have it for Port Orchard.
And if we go back to, and I guess you get into the port facilities and the use of them and so on and so forth, and that misunderstanding that we had because of the letter that was, unbeknownst to us, was sent and what have you, it's our thoughts that we are partners, and it's our thoughts that we work together, and as far as the port is concerned, myself and I'm sure Commissioner Strackle John will agree, is nothing is cut and dried when it comes to our facilities. The taxpayers own them. It's an amenity to the taxpayers. The taxpayers should be able to utilize them, and what have you, and community events. That's just the way it is, and you will get the support from the port, and there will be no restrictions or any of this. These letters sent to you in the future.
I'm not positive that the 2 commissioners have seen the second letter.
Seen what?
The second letter that we received. That's what I handed to the 2, the other 2.
Agenda? Are we in line with your
We-
plan? I'll make sure to.
We moved you up. You were number 2, and we moved you up to number 1.
So March 7th, this is what, is that this yesterday? You guys got yesterday?
Thursday.
This came Thursday.
I had a phone call from Mr. Weaver in anticipation of this meeting, and he said that he was going to send out a revised letter to me that I could share with the committee. More of my understanding, his comment was that the intent is still the same, it's just a softer spoken letter. And so that's what I brought today. The January 2nd date is the original letter, however, this is the revised letter, which I think he just put strongly recommended versus required, I think, from the original letter.
So having received the 2 letters, I think I'm not going to go into necessarily protocol, but I am, in that there's we, being the city of Port Orchard, and particularly this committee, want to know if the events and waterfront activity, regardless of what it is, if that's creating issues for the port, and then how can we resolve those issues? We want to make sure we understand what's happening, and how can we put some things in place that would ease the concern of the port and allow us to continue with the events.
So let me just give a little history.
Yeah.
And I think everybody probably knows what the history is. I haven't seen this.
I haven't either.
So we're just seeing this. But I can tell you that if I take it apart,
Right.
like for example, this 4 hours and 500 people, that's right out of an NSF manual somewhere, National Safety Federation manual
Okay.
code. That's a generic code that's out of a health and safety code, okay? So it's not a code that the port wrote, that second paragraph. You know, the bottom on the last paragraph, which is special events, yeah. We had issues with the restrooms where we had homeless sleeping in the restrooms. I'm sure you guys have had the same issues, challenges. We had drugs going on in the restrooms and really providing an unsafe environment. And of course, we want the Port Orchard, this community, to be safe, and so we don't want to create an area where people have an ease in which to do criminal activity and that sort of thing. So I think some of that's stemming from that, but going back to what Commissioner Stokes says is, I mean, we need to work with you guys, and that's what we want to do, and make it work for everybody.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, where I'm coming from, it would seem to me that if there's an event going downtown events and what have you, they get a permit from you, do they not?
Right.
Okay, it would seem to me that in that permitting process, you folks should be the ones that are saying we need so many restrooms and so on and so forth. I don't see where it is the port's business to tell you how to run your events.
I'm not as familiar, obviously, as Brandy is with our special event permit, but I know there's a section in there that if the event is going to use any of the port area, like the gazebo area, that they also then have to apply separately to the port. So there are two issues at hand. So Larry, you hit on exactly my concern. Is it's real hard to distinguish, are we talking our farmer's market? It's more than 4 hours, and I don't know how many people they generate, but I'm assuming it's in that 500 range, and that's really not near your port property. So we need to figure out what's appropriate for the city and because those people are going to go to the port facilities. So how do we, work together, and do you need to be, sign off on all of our permits? I mean, that's what what this group needs to chat about before we get heavy into event permit season, which is coming up.
Well, I personally, I go way back when it comes to the port, clear back to when we put the gazebo in and so on and so forth, clear back in the 1980s, and what have you. And I go back to when we had problems with the pump-up system for our restrooms, and we've increased that over the years,
Right.
and I've insisted that because they used to shut that restroom down. And so I'm the one that said, hey, this ain't gonna happen, we'll put pump-ups and so on and so forth. So I think it's just a matter of common sense. I would think that if the city is gonna put out a permit and what have you, that when it comes to your permit, you say, okay, if you're gonna have so many people, we should have so many porta potties taken into account, that we've got the restrooms down at the gazebo, and you've got yours across the street here, and taken that into consideration, and then info the port. Wouldn't you think that's about the way? Info the port and say, this is what, just tell us what's going on, that's all.
What about, because some of okay, I'm female, and if there's a flush toilet there, and if there's a Santa can there, I guarantee you which one I'm using, okay? I'm gonna go inside and use the flush toilet, right? So even if we ask the events to put out so many porta potties, which is probably the appropriate thing to do, we are still gonna have extra activity in your restroom.
Right.
So is there a way that we would want the events to maybe compensate you for supplies or compensate you for janitorial? I mean, is there,
No, I mean, it would cost you more to administrate it than the toilet paper that we had to put in there. I just, no. Here again, that's being human, that's being realistic.
right.
And I don't think that, it's little things like, if you were using the gazebo down there, for example, or
Right.
the overlook, you know, the question has come up, do we charge to use the overlook? Well, no, we don't charge. We might ask for a cleaning deposit or something of that nature, but, you know, we start nickel and diming the public, and they look at their tax statement on the 15th of you know, and they see that they paid the port $350 for the year and so on and so forth. You know, we can buy a lot of toilet paper for $350. That's my thoughts, so.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I mean, I agree. I mean, it's a public amenity.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think we should have hours of it, hours. These are the hours it's open. This is it. These are the hours it's open. And then if the port knows that there's an event going
I
on,
agree.
we can inform our staff and say, okay, this weekend there's farmer's market between 8 and 2. And next weekend there's, you know, the cruise Mustang, whatever, from 8 to 4. And then we know and our crew knows how they can plan for that. Because if we get outside those windows, we run into overtime issues, the same
Right.
as the city does. And of course, we're all in the same kind of a budget, you know, we want to pay attention
Right.
to it. So, I mean, Larry's right on. I mean, there's no reason to charge extra for it. It's a public amenity. But I think if we just expand the communication line so the port knows
Right.
what to expect, I think that helps. You know, and it wouldn't hurt to have a Santa can or two either when you have a certain number.
Yeah, no,
I
I'm
mean,
not,
You don't want lines out the, you know.
right, I'm not disputing that at all. I'm
Experience
just,
that too.
I want to make sure we can work together and that it's also not onerous for the events.
Well, we're on the same page.
Right.
I'll give you some, what happened is, we originally put timers on the restroom down there.
Okay,
We found that the public, or the violators would plug our timers so they could go in there and sleep and so on, and this type of a thing. So then we had to come up with a situation where we close the restaurants at when the crew goes home. During the summer, they're there till 7 o'clock or 9 or so on and so forth. That's when we would close the restaurants. And what have you. And then what we did, when that was happening, we had to lock the restrooms up. We didn't want them to use a tree behind it, so we put a porta potty in there, which we maintain. That porta potty is ours specifically for that reason. So when they're closed, so you know, that's where we're at on that situation. You know, if we have a big event going on, and it's going to go late in the evening or something, and so on and so forth, I've told you, and I tell them, they can call me. I'll come down and lock the restrooms up when it's done.
I have a question for Brandy. Is there anything in our application now that requires Santa cans after so many or anything like that?
No. And we did, once we got Mr. Weaver's first letter, we did reach out to the health district and ask them, you know, what are the requirements? Because we just, you know, what is your plan? And we're like, okay, we move forward. There's nothing in our code that requires a certain amount for a certain amount of people. We looked at the backup document that was provided in the letter, sent that to the health district, asked them, you know, is this the line that we need to be looking at? And basically their comment was that they don't monitor Santa cans. They don't monitor the number of restrooms in coordination with people for events. What their concern is, from a health and safety aspect, is wash stations in conjunction with food. And so we said, okay, is this some sort of guideline that we can use? And they said, that's fine, you know, it's up to the city how they want to guide that or use the numbers and the hours of events. So it's going to fall back onto the city to say, okay, what does the city want to require event organizers who are using that area down there? And so that's probably going to be the next level of discussion.
I have two comments, and one is, I suspect, because I don't regularly go down during the cruise, but I would think an event the size of the cruise has Santa cans placed around.
So,
Most of the events,
as near as I can tell, do you put them down for taste?
No.
No. The only two events that don't bring it down, because when we talked to the Mustangs last week, they bring them down. Cruise, I know, brings them down. So it's probably the Taste and the Seagull weekends.
And
Fathoms
Fashion Lights.
Fathoms brings them down
yeah, Fathoms.
for their their June, that weekend, you know, with the parade and stuff like that.
And 4th of July. They are anticipating, I believe, a couple porta potties for their Seagulls Flat run, is from what I understand.
Well, that's only if it's
Oh, if it's
necessarily
required.
required, because I mean, their run gets 150 people or something, so
Yeah.
it's not a requirement. I mean, it's not, I mean, so really, the only 2 weekends that, I mean, that I'm aware of is really is the Memorial Day weekend and the Labor Day
And then the
weekend,
Day weekend.
that, you know, we don't bring them down normally, and, you know, I mean, you can say our event only lasts for 4 hours, and so, you know, whatever, you know, because we're open to the public from 11 to 3-ish or 2-ish or so when the seagull calling contest is over with, so, but yeah, most of them do, you know, that when it's necessary. Have you ever had any complaints, Kathleen, about the bathrooms and?
Well, actually, when this came out, I hadn't seen this chart. So the suggestion to add 1 or 2 Santa cans during Taste of Port Orchard, I thought after last year, we did have issues with the restrooms being overwhelmed, long lines. So I was thinking that actually that makes sense. If we get 1 or 2 portable toilets, I think obviously most people will choose the port bathrooms instead anyway. But your staff member was kept really busy running back and forth, filling the toilet paper, unclogging the toilet, pretty much the entire event, which was really appreciated and kept the restrooms running. But then looking at the suggested numbers, like it would be between 12 and 16 portable toilets, that seems really excessive. I was thinking like 2 would be the number to bring down, because there's one down there anyway, that's down there when the restrooms are closed. So I think that would seem reasonable to add, you know, a couple as an option for people if there were lines at the.
So again, that's not necessarily a port issue, that's a city issue in our application. So I'll ask the council members, you know, what is your feeling?
So I think we should take a look at our application process, and then we should evaluate this. Numbers look a little high to me as
Yeah.
well. But I think we should probably revisit this and put some of this on the applicant to provide additional capacity.
And then can we also ensure that we have a good line of communication, so when you have an event,
Yeah.
that the port knows you're having an event, our staff knows, so we can kind of adjust.
Well, we do. I mean, I think even the farmer's market gets the application. The port's got an application that we fill out for just about everything that we do downtown, because one way or another, whether, I mean, we don't use the gazebo, but we have the judges are under the gazebo, and we do so we get the necessary paperwork and approvals, because I mean, I don't know what would happen if, there was a wedding scheduled at the gazebo the same day that we were gonna use it, and so they, the office down there does a good job of tracking, what's available and stuff like that.
The marina office.
Yeah.
And that is one of our requirements, that if
Yeah.
we're using any, somebody else's property, we need some sort of written permission that gives them approval to use the property. And so usually they attach Kathy's permission form.
So I think
It's a form that
that's
Kathy
there
sends off.
already, Axel.
It may not, be right, we could formalize it on the city's point, and, because we have the mechanisms in place to just let the port know.
Well, the
this is
city
what-
won't even put it on the public comment agenda, or, the public notice it until, if we're using port property, if we don't have the port letter, the city doesn't even put it out there won't
For
approve
public.
it, won't approve it until we get port approval.
So it sounds like we have mechanisms in place.
Mhm.
The other thing I'd remind is that we also have a couple bathrooms by the ramp parking lot that for the area-wide events are also used, so
Yeah.
there's some additional capacity on the wings of these events.
Yeah, does Chimes and Lights, do they bring in extra porta potties? or
No,
Chimes
and
Lights?
we're discussing that in the Chimes and Lights Committee, so.
Yeah. Well, I think this misunderstanding came up because of chimes and lights. And the bit long line, I would speculate the long line was, the complaint was about the one restroom down here, right? And that one restroom is the city of Bremerton's, or city of Port Orchard's. The restroom down here over
Right.
the pump station.
Right,
And that's where your line was, so it was really the city of Port Orchard's restroom that caused the long line. So So I speculate that's where it came from.
Are
A
you-
lot of people think that's the port's, and I think you'll find that the port goes out there and cleans it up because it's right next to us, but it's not ours, it's yours. So,
I want to just talk about the Taste of Port Orchard, because Kathleen said that this year, the port crew was very much appreciated. The staff kept the restroom clean, just so that the other people at the table know how cooperative the events in the port have been. There's a gentleman, Al Mahoney, who in years past had a key to the supplies, and he was at the taste and at all the concerts, and the port staff didn't have to do that. Al made sure everything was cleaned and the supplies were in there. So we've had a very, very good relationship over the years. So we want to make sure that continues. So what I'm hearing is we will look into, the city will look into perhaps adding something about restrooms and getting an idea of an appropriate number for time and number of participants in advance. The other question that someone had mentioned to me, and I can't remember where, is there an issue with vandalism during our events? And do we need more security?
yeah. My experience when it comes to crowds, okay, crowds are self-protective.
Okay,
I see that at our business and what have you. The vandalism doesn't come when there's a crowd.
okay.
The vandalism comes when there's no one around. So, but I think you'll find also that if our crew is out and dumping trash cans and things like that, I think you'll find that our crew doesn't pass up a full
Right.
trash can. If
Right.
it's in the city, if it's the city's trash can, they'll still pick it, you know.
Right.
So it's, it's a matter of common sense and working together. That's where I come from.
Is there any other issues we need more communication to make sure that they know when we have events, we're going to check into adding something about porta potties to our application. We'll make some determination about length of time of the event or number of people. Because in my mind went immediately to the farmer's market, because they're there more than 4 hours, and I know they have to average more than 500 people. And that's an every Saturday event. So where are they going to put a station? Because they would almost need a stationary porta potty. They're not gonna bring one in and out every week.
No,
So those are just some things we want to,
But I also think though that when you're looking at, say, 500 people, I mean, I don't know, if the farmer's market is open for 5 hours, how many people are there for 5 hours?
oh yeah, no,
And the average
it's,
is only,
Come and go, right?
Come
yeah,
and go.
maybe there's 100 people there at a time, 500 over the course of the day, which the bathrooms that are available downtown can
Yeah.
support that.
right,
I'd make it a point to come down to most of the farmer markets, and I've seen no bottlenecks or problems with the restrooms. I've seen a couple of times I've had to call the office and say, hey, could you come down and dump these trash cans or so on and so forth. So
And I think that's the way most of the events are, is they come and go,
right,
you know.
Right.
And if you looked at this, you know, the cruise needs 38 trash cans, 38 porta potties over the course of their.
Well, you don't have to worry about the crews. I'm quite familiar with them, and
Yeah.
And how many, you know, and I know they bring in the
them,
porta potties.
them
but they
boys are
don't bring
well
in-
organized.
They don't bring in 38 of them.
right. Because again, it's not like you having a football game and the crowd is contained there. Yeah, so it's a little different, so,
But-
okay.
Anything
But
else?
while we're, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
While we're talking about it, we on the port side need to be notifying you, the city, of when our rendezvous are coming and so on and so forth. So, are they doing that?
Yeah.
Are you well
Do they?
informed and so on and so forth, and saying how many people we expect and so on and that type of a thing? For 2 reasons. One for tourism, one to get out to the businesses, And the other thing is to handle any situations in the city, so.
I don't know that the city's been notified.
Pardon?
I don't know that the city's been notified of your guys' events.
I suspect it's going to the downstreet, the Port Orchard Bay Street Association or the chamber, but it would be nice
Should be notified.
to the city so that we can let the police department know.
Yeah.
I know we had a whole group of pirates in January or something. And after we'd had a presentation at the Port Orchard Bay Street Association, I let the chief know that there were going to be 200-300 pirates in town. Yeah.
So, I think that we need to notify,
Yeah.
I'll have them notify the city when
Okay,
schedule of our rendezvous and that type of thing. That'll also work real well for other activities that you might have going where you can say, hey, we got a rendezvous coming in, maybe we can have some of this, doing that, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So the interesting thing is on the pirate thing is I'm sure they got port approval because they used the gazebo for their pictures and stuff. But other than that, there was no other organized events, and so it wouldn't have made it to on anybody's radar.
which is why I went down and talked to the chief,
Yeah.
because there was no other mechanism for it
Right.
to get to him, yeah.
And they did stop by and ask us if there was any permits or anything that they
Okay.
needed
Yeah.
the week before.
Maybe you just
But-
need an info page where they can fill out, just say, what are you doing? And then that's when they can make the circulation.
And we do on certain events, if we see that there may be some crowd issues or parking issues or impact on certain streets, we ask them just fill it out as FYI so we can send it to Public Works, DCD, Police Department, Fire Department, so they're aware. So we do do that.
So on that same line that the commissioner talked about, so really for the business community on the business side, the port we are not event coordinators. That is not our business. Our business is economic development. But we oftentimes have conversations at our commission meetings about events such as Chris Crash Rendezvous, whether it be on Harbor Festival, whether it be on this side or the Burlington side. Those events are geared for tourism and they're geared to support the cities. Okay? They're not geared to support the port because that is not our business. So we do those events and we do that for the communities. But the conversations we have is we don't always know how engaged the business community is with those events, which kind of goes in line with where commissioners want the communication line. So, if we go through the work and effort to have an event such as the Chris Crash Rendezvous, what is the city doing and what is the business community doing to engage themselves with that event? Because if they don't engage themselves, there's no reason for us to have an event or even invite those people because it's a lot of extra work for us. We're not making really any money off it. It's really for the community. And so we want to be sure that the community really knows and are well informed and that the business people are engaged.
I think I can speak to the Chris Craft Rendezvous particularly. 2 years ago, we worked with the board really closely. The Bay Street Association did to put together a new event, the Art and Antique Fair, which is now the Artisan and Vintage Fair, during the Chris Craft Rendezvous. And that was in conversations with Kathy about how, the voters the year before, so that would have been 3 years ago, felt like there wasn't a lot downtown. At that time, we had fewer shops. Myries had just become vacant, and it was kind of a dead summer for downtown. And so there was a sense that the voters at the Chris Craft Rendezvous were pretty disappointed. And that's a huge, important event for our downtown business community. Those voters come in and they really spend a lot of dollars, tourism dollars downtown that weekend. So in order to support the voters and support that event and hopefully keep them returning, we started the Artisan and Vintage Fair to just create some more interest, something more to do. And then last year it grew, and this year we're working closely with Samantha Smith of Josephine's just to make it an even bigger event. And it's the 30th anniversary of the Chris Craft Rendezvous too. So that's kind of and it's really neat because those are antique boats, and this isn't kind of an antique, and we're kind of an antique and vintage downtown anyway. So kind of capitalizing on all of that. And now, of course, there's more for the voters to do when they come into town. There's a lot more shops, a lot more restaurants. So it's just but it just kind of helped to connect the business community with those voters and let them know, what's going on and get them walking around downtown more. We have the event down on Frederick Street in
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's really, it's for you guys and it's for the business in the city, so.
Yeah.
You know, and we're always want to do as much as we can to help out. You know, I mean, we have had in the last couple of years, you know, and not necessarily Port Orchard, but where the city would have an event permit, and then all of a sudden, the event people would get here, not here, but they would come to the city, and then all of a sudden, the event permit was like 3 times or double what it was the last time. And those are really counterproductive to
Right.
generating good business relationships if you want to have an event in your city, you know. Like I say, not here necessarily, but just, you know, be aware that we want to be business friendly and be inviting, and sometimes, you know, the city may do something, or, you know, a merchant may do something that we don't all know about, and all of a sudden it's impacting, you know, the event. It's like, oh, we didn't know that we want a fire marshal for 24 hours for the next 3 days, you know, and all that's costly, so. And those things aren't
Right.
invited.
Right, right. I think even when you have the different power squadrons and yacht clubs that come in, you know, they don't have the volume of boats that the Chris Craft do. But I think that they're very important economic generators for downtown. So,
Do you have the calendar of events that we have? I mean, we have a whole calendar that lays out the whole year. Do you have
yeah,
that?
so no, I don't know that we do.
So we could get that, to you. That'd be something.
Yes.
to share.
If you
Well-
could get it to Brandy's office, she can get it, she can push it out.
Yeah, and each time it's updated.
Mhm.
There's another thing that I'd like to note. This happened last year, and we've been informed it's going to happen again this year. It came to us strictly by accident because of somebody else. So the cruise ship coming into Bremerton.
Oh, yeah.
And the cruise ship came into Bremerton, and in my communications with some of the businesses in downtown, they told me that was one of the best business days they had. And I think that's something that the city of Port Orchard needs to capitalize on. We've got these cruise ships coming in, I believe at this time, they're gonna come in 5 times this year, and what have you. And I think that from a tourism standpoint, is we need to have people over there greeting them, people handing out brochures and that type of thing to get them to come on that ferry and come across. Because this cruise ship business could be big. It could really be big, and it all happened because there was a city that, well,
Wasn't very friendly.
they weren't very friendly, and wouldn't let the cruise ship tie up their own people at their own ship, and so the cruise ship just flat left and came here. So anyway, the union has got some egg on their face on that one, but
Matt, did you
anyway.
go to that?
No,
Okay.
not this last year. So I talked with Kathy and James, and we talked at the Explore Port Orchard. You know, the cruise ship tries to sell excursions, because what we had talked about is, you know, we would provide complimentary foot ferry passes, you know, to get them across. But then the question was, okay, you know, does the cruise folks want to sell a, you know, a $40 Port Orchard pass, and, you know, and they provide that, or, you know, so, you know, because we could easily stand on the other side and give everybody that walked off that sucker a free boat ride, you know, a free.
Them people on a cruise ship ain't worried about a $2 boat ride.
No, that's why they want to sell the excursion. They want to be able to sell.
We just want to tell them where Port Orchard is, and that's where I'm getting at. I mean, hey, come to Port Orchard, and what have you. The most they can do is not come, so.
Yeah.
But see, that's another example of, you know, I guess, what not to do, the city that lost the cruise ship. You know, and now we have this great opportunity, 200, 300 people coming. What do we do with it? Now it's our turn to capitalize, right? And make it a positive event for not only the people that are on the ship, but for the ship itself, so that we build that reoccurring business. You know, as Larry said, I mean, it could be a big deal. I mean, it could be not maybe we got 2 cruise ships this summer, or whatever, right? But it's important that the business community really engage, and they come up with a plan. Here's how we're gonna make that positive event for them.
Where's the cruise ship
Yeah, it's
tying
not
up?
us, but it's our job, so.
On the outside. How long is that ship?
It's
250, 240.
it's over 200,
Okay.
so, and,
So it's more of a.
so, and I was over their business people when they come in last year, and they're from all over the world.
Looks like
Uh,
a
The Discovery.
So, passengers. So.
But I think what our business community would need would maybe perhaps some contact information for the cruise line or information on dates or.
Yeah, we got the dates. The
whatever.
dates are on the calendar. So we're,
How long were they tied up?
Overnight.
Overnight, okay.
It's just a 24-hour stop, I think, or something like that.
But it could be a day and a half, or, I mean, there was enough to do. and
Yeah, they come in
exciting.
early and spend that whole evening in town and during business hours and that type of thing, so it probably is maybe 2 business days, one night, maybe, I don't know. So.
But that's something, so do we have a plan for looking at our application, looking at perhaps some either recommendations or requirements for porta potties? And we've heard that we need to let the port know specifically when things are happening. Would you also like us to let Ginger know? So you get, or do you, just the marina office here?
What's that, for events? or-
Yeah, the events.
Well, I think the marina office would be
Okay.
good. I mean, you can always shoot it to Ginger if you wanted to, but Kathy and
Okay.
Weaver
And
and
then-
they need to know.
Kathy would, they would have it for both marinas, because it's nice for both marinas to know what we're doing over here.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then you're going to make sure we know who's coming in. You're gonna send us that calendar.
Yeah, we'll get that to you.
And we've determined that vandalism by the events is not a significant issue because the crowd kind of controls itself.
Or nighttime, when nobody's
Yeah.
around, kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Lack of lighting, lack of people.
yeah, okay. So I think we're good. We're gonna
Good.
move on
Okay.
down with our agenda. You're welcome to stay, or you're,
Well, I'm gonna go.
Or we
And then
approve.
you have one more.
okay.
So I talked to the mayor about this some time ago, and this is really kind of a beautification or a debris cleanup kind of thing. There's that structure just offshore behind 7-Eleven. I got a picture here, I'll show it to you.
Those pilings?
Yeah, the little building on it.
Yes.
And on that is some garbage that I think would be great if it could be removed. There's I don't know how somebody got a wheel up there or a tire, and, but I was just hoping that could get cleaned up a little bit, because that is one of our walking areas. And there's some conduit there that's hanging down below and near the water, or maybe into the water. I was just wondering if the board could take a,
Who's done that?
Somebody pulled over there and put some wheels and tires on
I don't know how they got it up there, it's pretty
They
impressive.
went over with a boat or something.
Yeah.
So they just want it cleaned up. What do you think?
Yeah, we cleaned it up. We don't want to move any of the,
No, I get that
Structure
it
needs to stay.
has value in terms of leaving
yeah,
it.
because of the mitigation, but the,
No, I'm just talking about. like,
cleaning it up,
Just
yeah.
Get the wheels and stuff off.
Yeah,
And the conduit.
yeah, we'll get that done.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know, those pilings and that structure has mitigation value.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
So it's
They're worth lots and lots
Yeah.
of mitigation.
awesome. Morning, Mayor.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
Okay,
thank you
well,
very
thank you.
much.
And then if you can add Larry to your list, Commissioner
Yep.
Stokes, it's his
Yep.
district, and,
Yep.
I'm sure that he will be very attentive, right? You're gonna be all over it. Morning, Mayor, how are you?
Well, I
What-
just got back from Housing Kitsap, my monthly work.
Well, everybody here said it was your day to bring donuts. We were waiting for that.
that's why he was late.
They're in the oven.
They're in the- Okay, well, we're done, right?
Okay, yes, we are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Very much.
I believe.
Okay. Because we've been talking tourism, let's just move right down to our tourism strategic plan update. And I think it was in everyone's packet. And Brandy, we will let you talk about it.
So this is just the city tourism promotions strategic plan. We adopted a 2017-2018 plan, so I figured we probably should adopt a 2019-2020 plan. So very minor changes to this. Still have to update the graph, but I just obviously changed page 1, and then page 5. Under revenue history, I'll update that to put 2018's revenue history, which was 91,000. will update the graph of what the 5-year collection history is by month. And then on page 6, I went ahead and I removed 2015's allocation and added 2019 allocations. And then that is it. But, so that, this is basic cleanup, to get it ready for the next 2 years.
So back, I'm sorry, I was just wondering, is there a way to maybe make all those tables appendixes or something, and that way you don't have to update the strategic plan, you can just append them with updated information? And that way Brandy doesn't have to do this every year?
You know, that's a great suggestion. Brandy can look at that. I don't think it hurts us at all for committee members to review this every year and make sure.
Well, when the appendix is added, but I mean, then she doesn't have to go through and find
Yeah.
every place that it says 2018.
Right, no.
change it to 2015.
Right. Yeah, but I also, I agree with that. I have, if Brandy can make, whatever's easiest for Brandy, we want to do.
And normally this would have gone just straight to the council for basic, I would have done a staff report. This is just updating the years and the numbers.
Right.
But the main reason why it's before this committee is there's a somewhat of an unfinished task, if you will,
Okay.
from last year's comment
Oh, that's
from the lodging tax committee.
Right.
Which is that they felt, and actually it might be almost 2 years, that they felt that there wasn't a process defined as to how much we want to hold. It defines a percentage for first-time applicants, but what should that process look like? What should the application process be? Should they be meeting every month? They thought it was a little onerous to do something like that. Should we get applicants every month? Not likely, but it's still part of the thought process and to figure out how we're going to apply this, since it is in the plan. Ultimately, I would assume that lodging tax would probably come up maybe with a plan and then come to ED Tourism to finalize it in here, but since it started here, I wanted to start here. So that was pretty much it, and that is on page 10. Let me make sure it's still on page 10 from when I moved stuff around. City leadership, tourism, culture, so hold on just a second, I think it moved back a little bit. It is on page 9, under city leadership on tourism and culture. Strategy 1B talks about holding a certain amount for first-time attendees.
For first time, yeah.
And this is.
And then the allocation process in strategy 2A also talks about it.
Yeah. So lodging tax is getting ready to meet here in the next
Okay.
probably 4 to 6 weeks, maybe 2 to 6 weeks-ish. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity, if there's anything that you wanted to task the lodging tax committee with regarding this process, it would be a good time to do that.
And I think that is a good time, and I think taking it to the lodging tax committee and then bringing it back is fine. I'm assuming that our chair is going to raise his hand and
Yeah,
share again.
not to raise a hand, it's something that we committed to do, and, well before next year, it's just about time to
Right.
get that rolling.
I think
So
we
we talked
ha-
about March and April doing.
Okay. I would, this is just me talking off the top of my head, I would, for the first time applicants, how much, a dollar amount, I would pick some percentage, 2% or 5%. Like last year, the lodging tax in round numbers was 100,000. So if you said, okay, we'll put 1,500 for new events or 2,000 for new events, keep it an amount that would help the new events and encourage new events, but not be onerous to the existing events, if that's making sense.
I see what you're saying on that, and that's something I think is worth discussing with the folks, because quite frankly, the same people that are applying, it's the same groups that are applying, and it was a much general application than years before, which were very specific. Several were rolled up into amounts this time by groups, and holding something back for a new event, I think it's something that we need to discuss, along with the whole discussion about what is a reserve, et cetera, which is why we're gonna meet in the April timeframe.
Okay, and when we put together the strategic plan, that was one of the discussions we had, was because of the timing of the LTAC process, the groups that historically do events, put that together July, August-ish. It's mid-year, it's mid to third quarter
Right.
for all that, but there may be groups that in December, January think, gee, we'd really like to do this year, and are looking for money, and they're out of that process, because you have to know, again, late summer, early fall, what you're going to do next year to have any opportunity for LTAC funding. So the thought was an amount could be set aside, and then that would encourage new people.
I think that's a good, like I said, I think it's a good discussion to have when we have our meeting.
Yeah, yeah. So, Scott, do you have any input on that?
No, it sounds fine. I looked through this, looks fine, changes look good. The collaboration we talked about with the board is supported by strategy 7A, so.
Yeah.
I do have a concern, though, that the LTAC committee is so small and, really a limited knowledge base as far as making decisions, as far as, how much to hold back or, those types of things. Because, last year, they went and asked for more than was even allocated. And how are they going to be able to, how are you expecting at most 4 people, that's it, all 4 people come back, to decide that, we're going to go ahead and leave a pot of $5K sitting on the table just in case, when last year they came back and asked for more money than was even, earmarked for the process.
That was a lack of experience, because I took that from my years past working on Bremerton's lodging tax.
But I think the key words there is Bremerton lodging tax as opposed to Port Orchard.
Right, on the counties
Lodging
too,
tax.
on the counties, we did the same thing.
And
It wasn't a new idea.
right, but, lack of the, I don't know, what's the word, corporate knowledge of, of the different things, and, because everybody on that committee except for Lorraine last year was brand new. And so, I just think that having, it's a broader discussion, I think. Just like this was a broader discussion, coming up with the tourism plan.
Right, this was a broader discussion, and it was put in here. And that's when the original discussion took place, and it was approved by City Council. So this is what we're working with. Now, you're suggesting it should come out?
No, I'm just suggesting that if that more input, maybe having,
You're talking about increasing the size of the committee?
for this discussion, maybe, yeah.
As it is allowable by the RCW?
No, and I'm not talking about the RCW applies to the decision-making as to how much goes where. RCW doesn't have anything to do with deciding the plan and the strategy. That could be a group of people, a group of stakeholders, rather than the decision being made in a vacuum.
But we talked about that, about having more defining criteria on how to take the ask of one organization over another, and how do we say is there a certain substantial criteria to determine who's more important than the other? Not that anyone's really more important, but is more deserving, or is there a point system we can use?
It's subjective, it really is.
But that question did come up.
Right.
Because there was some debate on certain ones, like, oh gosh, well, that person's really important, and that person's important, but, do we
Maybe that's spreading peanut butter and.
Oh, yeah, do you go on to be fair?
And that's-
Like you say, spread the
and
peanut
that's-
butter all the way across, or do we really focus on true?
Impactful thing.
Right.
And that's where, but at this point, you're talking about spreading peanut butter, but then leaving a whole bunch of it in the jar still. And,
That wasn't the committee's choice. They were given a dollar.
no, but right now, part of this discussion is how much pot for future events. And, you know, next year the
I think
committee,
it was new events.
well, new events, yeah.
Exactly,
New
new
applicant.
events.
Yeah.
Yeah, a
And
new
it's not- and
applicant.
it's not holding it back.
Yes.
It's allocating a percentage of this, is what I heard, to
Mhm.
new events.
But what if no events come up?
Well,
Well,
see,
then
this
there-
is the point, is that the historic events know how to go through the process, and they know what their events are, and they do that late summer. And then the committee meets, but there could be events, let's just take the event that POBSA came up with for the Crisscross Rendezvous. Now, they could have done their whole process in the fall, and then in the spring say, you know, we want to complement the Crisscross Rendezvous, and we want to do this event for that. And that wasn't part of our budget and part of our LTAC. So,
But
we,
I don't think you can midway through the year, you'd have to,
you have to
you'd
have,
have to go through a whole process.
exactly, all you need is another process 6 months later.
Yeah.
You started in July, you do one in March and April. It's not rocket science, it's just, are we willing to put in the effort to make that happen? And then if there are no applicants during that time, whatever this, say it's 2%, say it's $2,000, that just adds in and goes to the next year. See, I don't think that it's that difficult. I think we've developed a very exclusive process to very exclusive events. And I think that if we want to grow those events or to encourage other events, we need to add an element to make that happen. Now, that's just my opinion, and that was what the group decided when we put this together. And it's very generic, and it leaves a lot, going back to what Jack said. It says in here, when they're doing the allocation, it says general standards, that they want to evaluate the projects based on data. And each organization submits a separate application, its project's budget, a statement of the community economic development. It has a lot of, but it's not detailed to tell you exactly. I think we've left that to the committee to, you know, what specific details do you want? But what events add to the economic growth and the tourism of the city of Port Orchard?
Right, and so and that's the part that I think that that there needs to be discussion on developing what those standards are. Because, I mean, next year, you're gonna have Jack, maybe Lorraine, and two totally new people. Two people that weren't involved in this process.
Right, and that's, I think, what Jay's committee would
But that's
talk
still,
about.
that's only 4 people. 4 people are
Because I have to have two hoteliers.
you have to have 2 hoteliers.
To have two, and if I have more that wanna serve, I can expand the group. It is pulling teeth to
I
get
know.
the
No,
2
but-
that I get.
No, but the actual determination is,
The importance to hotels.
yeah, the actual determination of where we want to go, there's no doubt that that's the way it has to be. But defining this criteria of who gets the money, if we want to try to come up with a point system or a rock, paper, and scissors, whatever that is, that decision needs to be made on a greater scope outside of the vacuum of the 4 people that sit on the LTAC committee.
I would like Jay to speak to that.
I would respectfully disagree with that. I think the discussions that were held in the committee were very conscientious of basically.
I'm not doubting that.
Well, no, but I mean, you want to put a point system or something when, you know, or have some criteria on how things are allocated, and that's really the function of the committee, to make that recommendation to the city council. So,
Which is just that.
which is the recommendation.
But
So
then
having a criteria for the committee to use is like, why bother having the committee?
If you'd like, if you want to contact Lee Reyes over the county does provide a criteria sheet before we go into.
Yeah,
Right.
But I mean, Jay, this is what the issue in the strategic plan was determining a criteria. Part of it was determining a criteria. Now, you're saying that a criteria doesn't need to be determined.
What I'm
No,
saying,
the committee needs to determine.
But the committee's gonna change every year, so does that mean the criteria changes every year?
it could make a
used to.
change, yeah, it could make a change based on the committee
Criteria
composition.
shouldn't come from the committee, it's coming from the council.
Can I ask one question? What happens, and I use this example, spur of the moment, the cruise ships start coming in and we start needing some money and they're needing something for this or that, they just,
Yeah.
huh?
Yeah, is there an allocation for it? The answer is no, not currently, and I think
So,
that's what's been
so
talked
that's what
about.
I'm getting at.
That's, right, that's the point I'm making.
That's, I mean, so now you've got a spur of the moment situation where you're gonna have some leeway in case that funds is needed, I would think.
And I can speak to that too. Just in the last week, I heard from 2 new downtown merchants that are interested in having kind of smaller events this summer. And we're looking for some funding for that from POVSA, but those events weren't included in our LTAC budget. They're not in our budget. And so if there was a way for new events, smaller new events, to just get some revenue for startup funds or something like that, just some money for the cruise ship, just that, but it would need to be publicized, like this is our midway chance, this is your chance to have a new event that you're looking to start. Because I think another issue is that not everybody knows about the LTAC process, and they don't know when to apply, and they don't know, the whole thing.
I know Brandy goes out of her
She
way
does,
to make
yes.
people,
But
but
it's
it-
far reaching, it's
it's,
a
exactly,
year and a
right.
Well, and it also has
Far
to be
down the road.
it also has to be a 501c corporation or organization that's applying for the funds. Because like the film festival couldn't apply for the
It
funds.
can't be a for-profit. I don't know, it has to be a
Government agencies.
501c3 because you're a 501c6.
C6.
I didn't say C3, I said
Right.
501c,
Yeah.
6 or a 3. And so if that prevents,
That's not true either, Matt, because government, we fund.
Government municipalities have
Port,
access.
We fund the ferries,
Rockingham Council Conference Center out of there.
yeah. So we can't fund for profit, but there are,
I've had parks departments come before me.
Just food for thought, far-reaching, and it isn't even gonna be this process, but we've got a community center presentation tonight. And if we're fortunate that we get funding for that, and this development moves forward, what's proposed is currently a 3-story project that has a library on the ground floor, and it's got a community theater probably on the 2nd floor, and conference space on the 3rd floor. And that conference space needs to be managed and promoted. And we might have a role, or should have a role in that particular aspect of it. And we might be wanting to look at a portion of our LTAC funds funding that marketing person that promotes and brings people to our community to use that facility. And that's premature, but it's something we need to think about in the back of our mind. How are we going to fund the operations and the marketing of that asset that's on our waterfront that will bring people?
Be similar to Bremerton where they already, before the allocation was
Yeah,
predetermined by the council, this amount's gonna go
Well,
towards.
it's that, here's what the council, if you go into the process, this is what the council needs. I mean, I think that's somewhat what happens with the Admiral Theater and the county and the Bremertons, that it still goes through the process, but it's the criteria, the strategic plan, and a piece of that is going to fund this, and I don't know what that looks like, or what the dollar amount's needed.
Just have to be careful that if I want to go through the LTAC committee first, that's a.
It
It has to, it has to.
Absolutely.
It has to.
The city
but-
has to apply,
Yes.
just like anybody else.
Right.
But ultimately, the council approves it, and if they go into the process knowing,
The council could still approve it.
I'd like to add to that, Mayor, and the standpoint is that's a very big concern on the managing this facility that we're putting up, and I use a classic example. the city of Bremerton right now is subsidizing through their hotel motel tax in the neighborhood of $100,000 for their conference center. And one of the things that's going to really determine on who manages this conference center, if it comes to pass in the city of Port Orchard, is who is going to step up in case there's a deficit to keep that running and so on and so forth. So I would think you might want to think about that. Because the port's involved in that and so on and so forth. And this is one of the discussions that we have had in depth on if there's a negative cash flow in that conference center, the people, I mean, the manager is gonna have to be subsidized somehow. And for the port to take it and what have you, we're gonna have to have some type of support if that comes to pass, unless the city runs it. So it's a big thing.
And it hasn't been solved yet, but I think we have a responsibility,
Yeah.
even if the port is, I think this is probably gonna own this and
Yeah.
probably has a role in the management structure, but I think we've got a responsibility to help support.
Yeah. So
And
it's
that's
gonna,
what
here
I'm
again,
on.
this is a team effort.
Yep.
But this is something we need to think about.
Yep. And it's not for today, but I'm just planting a seed.
Yeah, moving us back to the LTAC committee that's going to be meeting, I would invite the LTAC committee to discuss a percentage set aside for first time, and I would invite them to consider a mid-year application process or something fairly simple so that they don't have to think they're gonna have to meet every month and, oh my God, how am I gonna fit this in? I think it can be done, I just offered that
Yep.
for you guys to talk about.
I heard that loud and clear.
I don't wanna,
And just a reminder for clarification, so once the council determines that they want to open up whatever extra funds, you know, maybe you guys look at the fund balance, I don't
Right.
know, and you guys open it up, you open it up for applications, it goes to the committee, they talk about it, committee provides a recommendation. Council can't take action for 45 days once it comes to them, so keep in mind that once somebody knows that they want to apply for these funds, it's probably gonna be a 60-day process, so they can't come 2 weeks before and say, I have this event next month.
right,
It's a 60-day process.
Right.
So, you know, maybe, you know, I would say no more than once a quarter that the LTAC could realistically meet, and I think bi-yearly probably sounds
Listening,
more right.
yes, I think listening to committee, I think bi-yearly would be.
right. Did you have other things in there that you needed?
Nope, that was it.
Okay. The other outstanding issue, and this is, pay attention, Rob, this is for you. I'm not sure how we want to work through this process, but there was question last year about the funds available for LTAC. And I believe.
That's what we're having.
That's
that's
still
going
another
into me,
discussion.
yes.
So is that
That'll
going
be
to the
April.
committee?
Yes, and I'm going to be meeting with both Rob and with Noah. here.
No, okay, so we've got,
Yes.
Yeah, and we're,
okay,
I mean, we're always 60 days behind from when we get, you know, when money is
right,
received at the state to when we get it.
Right.
So, you know, we're only not even 3 months into the year. It's tough to say what we're gonna have for this year. I mean, although what I can say is that we've got January's numbers and they were good and we're on track and
I just wanted to make sure there was a process because that was open after last year's
That
LTAC.
was a huge part of our discussion.
Yeah, and so moving down our agenda, the video production,
Can I just flip back for
Oh,
a
sure,
second?
please.
And I know that everybody knows this, so it's kind of maybe thank you, Captain Obvious. But, you know, we're very limited by the amount of funds we get in LTAC
Right.
because of our lodging is very, very narrow. So it's
Right.
not like this is gonna be a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. We need to be very thoughtful about how it's divided up. And we get, you know, just the events that we have, we get more requests than we have funds. And those requests keep growing as the events keep growing. And that was a large part of the discussion last time, is how do you keep saying no when, quite frankly, they're all good events?
And we have to learn that it is okay to say no.
Well, I know, and we did, but, you know, it was very interesting, robust discussion.
You know, with Jack on your committee, he has a better feel for how things are going. I see, we see it 60 days after he does, so if Jack's coming to your meeting and saying occupancy's up and my revenue's up, that's likely to turn to correlate
That's how
to.
the whole thing came about with that surplus, because I said, I'm telling you guys right now, we were doing gangbusters, way better than the prior year. And last time at 60 days, I can tell you now, our January, February, best month, broke every record, doubled last year.
Why? So why do you think?
Because I was there.
Yeah, no, that's probably true.
So I know how to, there was no revenue management in place before.
Okay, I'm finished with the editorial.
Okay, no, but that's very true. But then I don't know what our role is in seeking sponsors or encouraging the different events to be open to the revenue sources.
That's a question we bring up at LTAC too.
Yeah.
Hey, what other sources are you going after? Are you applying for other grants or this or that? We want to know. Don't hold all your eggs to lodging tax.
Right.
No,
Okay, we will move on to the video production.
So I don't have an update. I
Okay.
did reach out to him.
Okay.
He did respond to me over the weekend that he's working on a formal report. So he should have that to me in the next day or two, and then I will send it off to the committee.
Okay,
So
Nick,
I was hoping to have one, but.
you've been so patient. It's your turn.
All right, so,
You're not very tan.
Henry, you are. He was just in Mexico.
Oh, that's right. We need to get back.
Friday night.
Friday night, okay.
So, back from vacation, and apologies to Councilmember Diener, who's seen at least half of this already. I have sent a couple of emails out to the full city council in advance of our work study meeting next week. I wanted to give some background on this to the committees to make sure that you're prepared to discuss this, because we have a short timeline for commenting to PSRC on the proposed Vision 2050 updates. There's two pieces to what we are discussing here. The first piece is that we received the notice that a draft supplemental environmental impact statement has been issued by PSRC that outlines the three alternatives for the growth strategy for the Puget Sound area through 2050. I realize that the handout that's in your packet is from June of 2018, so this is slightly old, but if you go to the link that was in the website that was emailed out, it outlines the three alternatives that are being considered. One of them is stay the course, continue under the current growth assumptions. One would be to look at what's happened since the last growth strategy was adopted, kind of correct, and then continue, but it's a little bit more dispersed of a growth pattern by taking into account what's happened in places like Gig Harbor, Covington, some of the outlying areas that have grown faster than what was envisioned in the growth strategy. And then the other alternative is a more transit-oriented growth strategy that would encourage putting 75% of the region's growth into our designated centers and high-capacity transit station areas. That includes downtown Port Orchard, which is considered a high-capacity transit center because of its foot ferry. And so these three alternatives have very different implications for Port Orchard in terms of how much growth we have to plan for and how we accommodate it. Generally, I think that we're going to end up with a hybrid of these approaches. I think we are going to see a more transit-oriented approach, possibly with some corrections for what's happened over the past few years, but I think that we need to make sure that we comment, and previously KRCC has tried to comment as one organization. I don't think the county and the cities are going to see this the same way necessarily, so I think the cities need to be prepared to comment on their own, and I think our comment letter will probably look very similar to Bremerton and Paulsbo's comment letters. I think Bainbridge will probably have their own set of issues, and I think the county is going to have a comment letter that reflects what Pierce and Snohomish County are also saying, which is different than what the cities in those counties tend to be saying. So start looking through the executive summary and kind of what the alternatives mean. And for reference, staying the course, in our last comprehensive plan, we were required to accommodate 8,200 people over a 20-year planning period. So this is going to add 10 years onto our 20-year planning period. So essentially, stay the course means an additional 4,000 people within the city limits of Port Orchard. If we go with a transit-oriented strategy, it may be slightly more than 4,000 people, with a large chunk of those slated for proximity to downtown or other transit stations, which we do have a local center strategy in place where we want to try to work with Kitsap Transit to be able to get people to the high-capacity transit center. And then the dispersed growth pattern potentially means looking at going further out into the UGAs, putting more growth in unincorporated Kitsap County, and that's going to put more burden on our traffic systems in terms of accommodating vehicle traffic and outward growth.
If you had said basically, right now, to Vision 2040, our increase is projected to be a little over 8,000. And if we go out another 10 years to 2050, that's going to go out another 4, so basically 12,000. How does that impact the UGA? Because I know the last one, 2040, took us and our UGA to just about a little over 41,000 population.
Well, quite honestly, I don't think that, based on how much land capacity we had in the last report, I don't see any UGA expansion happening as part of this next cycle.
Okay.
I think that Silverdale is probably going to be doing some upzoning because they're a regional center. I think Bremerton may be doing some things with zoning codes. I know Port Orchard is, the zoning code that we're about to adopt tomorrow night has implications. I think that the actions that cities are taking to allow for more flexibility in development and the things that we've done downtown are going to accommodate that growth without going further out. But that all has to come out of a report that will be generated later.
Okay, but rather than expanding our UGA, keeping the UGA as it is, the growth within inside that UGA for the next 10 years, would it be half again? Because they're not transit oriented, so would it maybe be a third again?
It's hard to say. It could be a third again. I think depending on which strategy we take, if we go with the transit-oriented development strategy, I think that we're actually talking about focusing growth within our city so that it's not just one number for the city, but we want to really make sure that we have the tools in place in these pockets of our city to really encourage the growth to go to those areas.
We want that growth without, if we can, more cars.
No, I got it.
And one of the discussions, because I sit on the Growth Management Policy Board over at PSRC, and there's an individual or two that said, well, how do we stop this growth? Well, that isn't this
Right.
exercise.
Right.
We know that the Puget Sound region is going to get this growth. We can't build a wall. And how do we, I don't think we can.
Let's not touch this one.
So people organically are coming to the Puget Sound region.
Correct.
Do we want this growth to happen in the cities, or do we want it to happen in the rural areas, which is going to take more cars and more roads?
And more infrastructure,
And
more
infrastructure.
sewers.
So
Yeah.
it's really about, when I hear the number, I'm not comfortable with it, but the alternatives are, I think, worse. We want to we've got the high-speed ferry, we've got transit, and we're making significant investments in that. We need to leverage that investment.
And that was the largest single issue commented on and favored for resolution was transit.
So the second part of this, and I think really where the rubber meets the road on implementing whatever alternative is selected, I passed out a packet from the regional staff committee that I attended back in February, and there's some strike-through and underlying changes to the proposed policy language in Vision 2040. So when they update to Vision 2050, these are proposed amendments to our regional policies. There's a couple of things that sort of raise some red flags for me, and some of them are more just editorial comments, but I think the real key is that it's really emphasizing that we are prioritizing local funding in support of the growth strategy, whereas previously they tried to implement the growth strategy just through the regional pot of money and the countywide pot of money that's federal money that comes into the area. They're really wanting to see us take more steps in our local budgets and essentially saying that the region as a whole, at the local funding level, needs to prioritize investing in centers. And so that
Even
potentially.
are we talking local transportation dollars or just
Local water,
local
sewer,
dollars,
I mean,
any
it's-
regardless?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's regardless. So I
Okay.
think that I don't think that it's likely, except maybe in a place like Bainbridge Island, that anybody would appeal a city budget decision to not fund something. But I think they're really trying to steer your local budget to fall in line with the regional growth strategy more so than they have in the past. There's also a couple of places in here where it talks about retrofitting existing infrastructure, where it's either stormwater infrastructure or transportation infrastructure, where it's not just saying that we build new facilities a certain way, it's saying that we do something with our existing facilities. And so when I see the word retrofit, and I look at the funding realities that we go through every 2 years when we write our budget, I know that there's not a lot of money for doing something like that. So I would just encourage you, the comment letter on this policy language is due sooner than the comment letter on the EIS. And so I'm going to be preparing 2 draft letters and trying to highlight some of these issues, but I want to make sure that anything that you're concerned with in here, get that to me so that I can put it in a draft letter that we'll discuss next week at council. And I think I got to have that to Brandy by Thursday or Friday this week. So read through this, and if you have any specific comments, please let me know so that I can try to work that into a draft in advance of our discussion.
I want to talk about my weekend. I went down somewhere south of Portland, okay? They just all run together, you know? Lake Oswego and Tigard or Tuwalin, I mean, they just all kind of run together. But I think that area is really dense, okay? But I didn't feel crowded. I don't know if I'm saying that right. There were apartment buildings that I didn't, oh gee, that is an apartment building. Didn't recognize it as that. So I thought they've done a nice job with density. We did some shopping in 2 or 3 different shopping areas. They were all crowded. I mean, there were a lot of people down there. But I noticed that the shopping areas, the buildings themselves were smaller. They were more, I don't want to say neighborhood, but neighborhood. It wasn't, you know, massive, but they were, they fit the needs of the neighborhood. It's getting back, I think, I'm trying to talk about the centers discussion, is that everything those people needed was in this area. The other thing, and I was going to take a picture, but I was driving, so that would make it more difficult. And they have one in Paulsbo, but there was a Safeway store there, new Safeway store. Parking was all underneath. It was just, it would be just like going to our Walmart, but the Walmart's up a floor and the parking is all underneath. And then, of course, we spent a bit of time on what's called the Springwater Trail and Selwood Park, but I can't tell you how busy those trails were. The Springwater Trail is 40 miles and it goes around the Willamette River in that area. And there were bikes, there were people, I mean, it was busy in all directions. And then there was also a more of a McCormick Woods type walk through the woods, an interpretive center around a pond and something. Anyway, really, really nicely done, and everything was really well used. So to me, it was kind of eye-opening as to how it could be dense, but they've provided outdoor amenities. The shopping was convenient. You didn't have to drive, you know, miles and miles and miles for it. Anyway, it was just, not being a planner, I normally don't notice those things, but I did this time. So I think it can be done. I think it can be done.
You suggesting a field trip for the city council?
Well, we could, yeah. And there's no sales tax, Noreen. That's why we did all the shopping centers.
You know, Beck's point of the shopping centers and the whole center for concept, what is the density of the number of centers a town has? Because if we had a center up on top of Mile Hill and we had a center, you know, I mean, and they're probably earmarked in the town already,
We've got,
You know, I mean, how,
They're supposed to have a maximum of a half-mile walking radius, so you really want everything to be walkable from the center of each of these centers. But and there's different hierarchies of them. There's a local center, which is very compact and small. It could be just an intersection where there's some activity. There's local centers, which are more cohesive, and if you're familiar with the Proctor neighborhood, that's where I live in Tacoma, would be like a kind of a countywide level center, and then from there it goes up to downtown Bremerton or downtown Tacoma or Seattle. So they come in different sizes. And
yeah, because I was wondering how many centers we can have in Port Orchard, given our,
we have a lot of land, so
I think we have 8 or 9.
10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one is the industrial center, I think.
But they have different purposes at different sizes.
yeah.
Don't we want to fill those businesses before we plan more centers?
Is there anything else for the discussion in the?
I had something,
Okay.
because we're kind of revisiting our first item on the agenda. Back at the January meeting, we talked about talking with the downtown merchants about some questions that had arisen over parking restrictions.
Right.
And so I have a letter that I just wanted to present to you, Beth, and then our other council members and the mayor. So we discussed this at our February 21st Port Orchard Bay Street Association meeting, and we had a really vibrant discussion about the 2-hour parking restrictions versus the 4-hour parking restrictions, which culminated in a motion being made to ask that the council consider that all parking downtown currently designated as 2-hour be changed to 4-hour. We did discuss that merchants carefully considered the issue from all sides, including the history of the merchants parking all day in front of their own businesses, thereby deterring business. And the current merchants felt that the benefits of a standardized 4-hour parking restriction far outweigh the risks, and particularly the lost business that results from the 2-hour parking. Although not all the merchants were present for this meeting, I did make an effort to talk to the majority of the merchants, and the majority do feel that they support the 4-hour restriction. There's just a general sense that there's a loss of business, there's a discontent among their, particularly restaurant patrons, that the 2-hour restriction is inhibiting them staying or even visiting the restaurants after shopping, or visiting services, such as getting their hair done. So this is something that because it was discussed in this committee, and going back to the merchants, that's their kind of consensus and how they're feeling.
Yeah, we will take this up. Yeah. Do we want?
Is it a land use committee issue or?
Well, it's been land use, but more on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis versus maybe the economic impacts from something like this request.
Do we want to maybe take it to a work study and then move it to land use? I mean, after we have a flavor, or do you just want to take it into land use?
Let's take it to work study, if you're okay with that.
Sure me.
Okay.
Thanks.
I have one more small thing.
Please.
I just wanted to let everyone know in your council packet for the zoning code adoption, which is scheduled for tomorrow night, we had one last minute request for a change on the map where somebody wanted the back portion of their site commercial mixed use rather than commercial heavy. So there's an alternative map that was in the packet. We also got some last minute feedback from Code Publishing, and they found a handful of probably a page and a half of Scrivener's errors that are some references and whatnot. We'll provide you the list of what Code Publishing has provided us, and we're just going to address it as part of codification. I don't know that we have it in order for you to actually vote on all those little tweaks, and I don't want to reprint all 300 pages of the ordinance. So we'll find a way to get that information to you, but just be aware that that's coming.
And Kathleen, I'm not sure this can get, it won't be on this month's work study. So we'll give that to the mayor.
April, Randy.
Gary talked to his client, and they just wanted to move forward with that reclassification.
As far as I know.
Okay.
I just got back this morning, so.
He's going to a meeting.
Anything else? Then we're good, and
All right.
I think that's an hour off still.
I think it is
No,
an
you
hour.
just- no,